Greetings, people of YouTube! Well, here I am again at the final Bowser stage to bring you the countdown you've all been waiting for. Before we get started, let me just say a couple things. These episodes were chosen and ranked strictly on how many votes they got. So if you don't agree with where an episode is placed, or the episode you voted for isn't here, please don't freak out over it. Also, like last time, please be mature with your comments. Alright, don't want to keep you guys waiting any longer. Welcome back to the MoBrosStudios Top 20 Worst SpongeBob Episodes. Number 20. A Flea in Her Dome. I was a little surprised at first to see this at the top of the tiebreaker, but now I can understand why. This episode's infested with weak jokes and uninspired conflict. It begins with SpongeBob and Patrick crying already.
Sandy's been gone for 2 whole days.
I miss Sandy so much. Her tentacles, the way she plays clarinet, her massive nose.
Wow, he really doesn't give a damn about her. SpongeBob gets the idea to prepare a welcome back party for Sandy, so they put on a lame preparation montage that ends as soon as she arrives.
Welcome home, Sandy. You know that. We missed you.
No! No one wants to hear you sing!
A blessing from the Lord.
The party quickly dies when Sandy gets an itch caused by a flea she brought back from Texas.
This here flea collar will send the critter a-running.
Connect the dots. I drawed a horsey.
They spend a good chunk of the episode fighting over the collar before finally sharing it. But the fleas rapidly multiply and fight back with the dark forces of unoriginality.
You know what? None of this would have happened if you didn't come back with your infestation. All you've brought us is fleas and trouble and pain and itching and rash and pain.
And playing tic-tac-toe and doing jigsaw puzzles.
After a minute of senseless bitching, it finally dawns on them that fleas can't breathe underwater. They may have triggered the apocalypse, but at least the fleas are presumably dead. Speaking of the apocalypse, on to the next episode. Number 19. The Main Drain. This was part of a ratings trap called Legends of Bikini Bottom, and boy am I glad to see it here. Not only is it boring as hell, but the plot makes absolutely no sense whatsoever. Like many newer episodes, it starts off with a couple minutes of padded out filler.
How about you, Squid?
No, I do not want a Krabby Patty.
You sure?
I'll add extra mayo. Anyway, SpongeBob goes to unclog the sink when Mr. Krabs intervenes.
Stop messing with that drain plug!
Why don't you want me to pull the drain plug, Mr. Krabs?
Time for a scary story, boys. The story of the main drain.
Basically, the story says a couple of kids unplugged a drain they found on the ocean floor.
Causing an apocalypse in the sea! And nobody was ever heard from again.
Then where'd the story come from? Despite the warnings they're given, SpongeBob and Patrick decide to look for the drain. They try to get some clues from Plankton and Old Man Jenkins, but just end up slowing down the plot, which isn't even that eventful to begin with.
Patrick, we need to find that drain!
What?
Isn't your curiosity piqued?
Nope.
If you're not going to do anything, at least make some decent jokes.
Let's start walking.
Oh, no thanks. I'm not into the whole walking thing.
Have I ever mentioned to you guys how unlikable Patrick is nowadays? He's either a smug smartass or an intolerable dumbass, neither of which is pleasant to watch. Anyway, after pummeling Squidward for no reason, they finally reach their destination.
Let's pull it.
No! We came to see if it was real.
Well, how do we know this isn't a fake? If we don't, we'll never know.
In other words, he's willing to risk ending the world just to prove his point. Quick move, Patrick.
No! You see,
We were the two dingalings who pulled that plug.
No way. Still doesn't make any sense.
We almost messed up big time.
Ugh, that was so forced it hurt. But at least those two Hellspawn are gone for good.
Ah! That's the most realistic story I've ever heard!
You are not serious! Not only is that the most cliched twist ending to ever exist, but now the whole plot makes even less sense than before. Way to excuse your own lazy writing, you cheap bastards. And people wonder why this show's going down the drain. Number 18. All That Glitters. Why do these guys try to put morals into their episodes? They rarely get it right. It begins with SpongeBob trying to prepare a plot device called the Monster Patty.
1, 2, 3.
Don your rain gear, folks. Dear Lord, not even a day without tears had this much crying. After crying for several hours, SpongeBob visits his spatula in the hospital. Wait, what?
We'll try to do everything we can.
Thank you, Doctor.
I'm not a doctor. I'm an actor researching for a role. I am so totally gonna get this part.
You may not realize this, new writers, but mean-spirited is not the same as funny. SpongeBob mopes around until he comes across a promising machine called a spatula. Because of its ridiculous price, he sells everything he has in order to buy it. But rather than boosting his career, this happens.
Spad, is there something wrong, pal?
I would not dare touch such slop as this, how you say, Krabby Patty.
Excessive stereotyping is also not the same as funny. Especially if it causes a scene like this.
We have something!
How's that for something? Au revoir, peasants! Have fun laboring in your greasy spoon.
Honestly, that was one of the meanest scenes on this show, and it came clean out of nowhere. SpongeBob decides to retrieve his old spatula from the hospital, but it appears he's too late. Oh wait, no he's not.
But I didn't mean to betray you. It was a moment of weakness. All that glitters is not gold.
Shoehorned much? I guess they realized all the spatula soap opera BS completely overshadowed the moral. Anyway, SpongeBob's spatula forgives him and the episode ends. The moral of the story is, if you're going to write a fable, actually know what you're doing. Number 17. Demolition Doofus. I couldn't find enough clean footage of this episode, but I'll give you the main points. SpongeBob injures Mrs. Puff so badly during a driving test that he ruptures her inflation sac, meaning she'll never be able to puff again. As a result of this, Mrs. Puff becomes flanderized beyond belief and tries to get SpongeBob killed in a demolition derby. My hatred for the cubic creeper aside, that's pretty screwed up for this show. It was actually rather disturbing how bloodthirsty she was. Most of the episode is SpongeBob competing in the derby, which is really just a generic noob wins by default scenario. In other words, SpongeBob wins the derby by doing damn near nothing. I just love it when he gets rewarded for wrecking someone's life. Number 16. Wigstruck. Of all the episodes on this list, this is one of the few I don't necessarily agree with. I'll explain in a couple minutes. We first see a rock band picking on one of their members for the wig he's wearing.
Give it back, man! If you want it, you gotta catch it, dude. Oh, man!
I'll give you one guess where it ends up.
I'm ready! It's a wig!
SpongeBob practically falls in love with the wig and starts wearing it wherever he goes. The whole town starts making fun of him, but he predictably mistakes their jeers for compliments.
Off to meet the Queen, Sir Nerd Leroy?
The name is SpongeBob, and no, I am not meeting royalty.
Most of this episode feels like an underdone version of that one scene from Grandma's Kisses. But instead of sympathizing with the main character, the audience is mostly just bored by his blindness to reality.
It's about as functional as your brain.
Thank you, Squidward.
That wasn't a compliment!
Towards the end of the episode, Sandy decides to talk some sense into him and takes him to the movies. This is where SpongeBob's obliviousness finally crosses the line.
Do you mind?
It's very rude to talk during a movie.
SpongeBob?
You do, Sandy. People are trying to...
Oh god, where's an angry mob when you need one? And so, SpongeBob decides to dump the wig, the bald rocker gets it back, and because of the band's popularity, the wig becomes a huge fad.
I was cool before anyone else?
Yes, you were, but not anymore.
Now to explain why I disagree with this episode. While I do get annoyed by SpongeBob's obliviousness, it actually, for the most part, felt like his classic naivete. And the writers do manage to work some decent humor into this episode.
You wouldn't know cool if I locked you in the freezer.
For your information, Mr. Krabs, Squidward has locked me in the freezer.
Overall, I thought it wasn't good or terrible, just weak. Number 15. Someone's in the kitchen with Sandy. Two major problems with this episode. One, it's a direct rip-off of Imitation Crabs, and a terrible one at that. Two, they scapegoat Sandy for an onslaught of cold-hearted scenes. Looks like you guys hooked a ripe one. In an attempt to steal a Krabby Patty, Plankton ends up inside Sandy's tree dome.
Time to get this stinky thing off.
Is it just me, or are they turning everything on this show into a plot device? In this case, Plankton steals Sandy's apparently removable fur and plans to use it to get the Krabby Patty formula.
This is gonna work like a charm.
Despite being even more obvious than the Mermaid Man and Barnacle Boy costumes from shuffleboarding, everybody falls for it.
You look different.
I just breathe underwater now. It's as simple as that.
Hacks!
So Plankton gets SpongeBob to show him how a Krabby Patty gets made. In Imitation Crabs, they handled this scenario both creatively and comically. Here, they didn't even try.
Oh, you're off center by 3.6 millimeters. Oh, try it again, Sandy.
Wasn't there another character involved here? Oh yeah! Sandy storms into town in search of her missing hide, but only finds the cold-hearted scenes I mentioned earlier.
Seen anybody in these parts hauling a fur pelt?
Look at a naked chipmunk.
Look, a hairless goat.
What is so funny about getting my fur stole?
Aren't you ashamed having your pink rat flesh exposed?
Yeah!
I'm surrounded by assholes.
After Sandy flees into the sewers, Plankton finally loses patience with SpongeBob and tries to escape with the formula. But Sandy catches him and defeats him in 10 seconds flat.
We'll take that sicko off your hands.
Thank goodness you're here.
We're referring to you, ma'am. Public nudity is against the law in this county.
Why must the innocent be punished so? Number 14. Toy Store of Doom. A concept with so many creative possibilities, and these guys went and blew it. SpongeBob and Patrick get bored one day and discover a new store is coming to town.
Where's the toy store?
Guess it's not open yet.
Not open.
Somewhere beyond the sea, somewhere.
Fortunately for us, the store suddenly opens and gets them to stop their crying.
Can I help you?
That depends. Tell me, do you like to sing?
Oh no.
Several songs.
Oh, thank God. When the store begins to close, Patrick, like the other brats in the store, refuses to go. So the two stow away so they can have the whole store to themselves.
Nothing can ruin it.
It's dark. It's scary.
We just need to find the light switch.
Right, SpongeBob. We find the light switch, and everything turns out peachy!
What's his problem?
Finally, 7 minutes in, the of Doom in the title comes into play. Ugh, the lack of creativity is agonizing. They have the idea for a nightmarish toy store, and this is what they come up with. Shooting bubbles at a wind-up robot. In fact, there was an episode of Rugrats that had a very similar plot, and even they had more interesting conflicts. Anyway, the robot runs out of power, Patrick rewinds it like a dumbass, and they rush outside as soon as the store reopens. That's it. But as uninspired as this is, our next contender is even more so. Number 13. To Squarepants or Not to Squarepants? I can only describe this as the sister episode to Best Day Ever. It's curt, boring, and has no business being called a special. So what did they try to hype the hell out of this time?
The unimaginable happened. One day, SpongeBob Squarepants changed his pants.
That wouldn't have made a big deal in the pre-film era. While SpongeBob's doing his chores, Patrick decides to call and trigger the conflict.
You want to hear how long I could do this for?
I'm kind of busy. Can it wait?
No!
They really are turning everything into plot devices, even the characters. SpongeBob eventually gets to his laundry to find all his pants have shrunk. He tries in vain to find more at the mall, so he settles for a familiar substitute. And then we get a good, slow 3 minutes of nothing happening. Huh, deja vu.
It's me, SpongeBob.
No, you're not! SpongeBob has Squarepants!
Because as we all know, it's all about the outer appearance. Believing no one knows him anymore, SpongeBob reapplies for a job at the Krusty Krab. The rest of the episode is, get this, SpongeBob and Squidward being douchebags to everyone.
Not in everything you know.
Oh, that's real nice.
For the ending, Mr. Krabs finally talks some sense into SpongeBob and everything goes back to normal. That was what they call a special. An 11-minute snore fest that felt like it was done in 11 minutes. Just wait for the other specials that made it on here. Number 12. Stuck in the Ringer. This one came very close to making it onto my original countdown. Is it as bad as I remember? Let's see. It begins with some awkward sentient objects jokes, before having SpongeBob get stuck in his ringer. Not surprisingly, Patrick is the cause of this conflict.
I kind of need your help over here. I'm a little stuck.
There you go, buddy! Now you're stuck forever!
Freaking idiot.
SpongeBob tries to go about his normal routine, but the ringer proves to be nothing but trouble.
Way to go, buddy.
Aw, thanks, pal.
Oh no, don't you dare go the Splinter on us. Ah! Don't go Squid's visit on us either! The carnage piles up until Mr. Krabs decides to throw SpongeBob out.
I'll help.
Help! I think you've helped quite enough today!
Patrick happens to walk by and tries to cheer him up with ice cream. Since that didn't work, Patrick brings him to the carnival and only makes him more miserable.
If it wasn't for your forever glue, I wouldn't be stuck in this thing.
I was only trying to help.
Help! I think you've helped quite enough today.
Okay, that was a good bit of reincorporation. But then this happens.
You know, kid, your body isn't the problem. It's your heart. You deserve what you've gotten.
Wait, Patrick disables SpongeBob, selfishly puts his joy before his friend's pain, and SpongeBob isn't allowed to scold him for that? Butt out, townspeople! Patrick tries to stay mad at SpongeBob, but quickly gives in and checks on him.
I can't hear you, what with all the lonely voices in my head.
I'm so sorry!
Get ready for another one of the worst endings in SpongeBob history.
Look! It worked! I guess crying does solve your problems after all.
That's the message they're going for.
Fuck!
Honestly, I was ready to give this episode some points for story, but that just murdered it. Let's move on before I put my fist through my monitor. Number 11. Trench Billies. This was part of the same ratings trap as the main drain. This story tells of SpongeBob and Patrick getting held hostage by redneck stereotypes. First the French and now this? Come on! Our two protagonists go through a typical jellyfishing scene before plummeting into a deep trench.
You boys are mighty colorful.
Tell it to more angler.
I don't like where this is going. Unable to escape, SpongeBob and Patrick must go through a clan initiation or else they'll be killed. Seriously.
To deem them worthy.
Worthy of what?
Of living. Come get your fiddle.
Am I the only one that finds this a little disturbing? A single family in a completely isolated region with morbidly deformed offspring? Oh no. Are they really suggesting? Kids may not pick up on that, but it's still a stereotype. Speaking of which, SpongeBob and Patrick's initiation is composed of wrestling, hollering, and dueling banjos, and they of course complete each one without a hitch.
Well, Patrick, even though you won, it looks like he was the real star. Bob!
That was terrible.
The clan thus allows them to live another day, but there's a catch.
you've been given the great honor of taking care of Ma for the rest of your natural-born lives.
For the climax, the Abyssal Hillbillies follow SpongeBob and Patrick back to the surface and settle down for lunch at the Krusty Krab.
Oh, yeah. She's gonna make Customer of the Week.
What can I say? The humor is weak, the story is weak, and it stereotypes to the point of disgust. Brace yourselves, ladies and gentlemen. The worst is yet to come.